Welcome back, everybody. It is Tuesday night in the NFL regular season, and you know what that means. It is Getting Defensive, brought to you by Gridiron Ratings. I am your host, Craig Reith, and with me, as always, we have the man, the legend himself, Gary, the IDP tipster. Gary, we'll get to your unfortunate sort of fantasy weekend here in a moment, but we have a guest with us tonight. He's my cohort on the Roto Heat IDP show, which we have on Monday nights during the off season. We have Brad Menendez. Brad, how are you doing?
Reunited, and it feels so good. It's a pleasure to be on here. It's a pleasure to finally get to talk to Gary, one of the masterminds behind IDP. Just a genius in the market, and I love it. I'm excited. I'm thankful that you guys have me on, and I always love talking ball with some of the best in the business. So, and that's what I feel like we're doing tonight.
Gary.
You're making a grown man blush, man. Look, I just like fantasy football. I'm glad to be a part of this. I appreciate the kind words, sir. Brad,
he knows
I'm
how to
glad we finally
people.
got you on here.
Yeah, it's fun. I mean, and think about what I remember times when we were doing it with pen and paper. I've been doing fantasy since 98, 99, and to see where it's come and see how IDP's taken over and become a more important part of fantasy. It's a blast. And, you guys do an excellent job, and you've been one of the forefront of that movement. So, I like to make people blush when I can. I love to spread some good comments.
Nailed it. Thank you.
Gary, how'd your weekend go? I mean, we're getting into championship week for most people, and I know you had some frustration there.
Man.
Was the defense that let you down, or what happened?
Nah, actually, my defense and even with the COVID problems this week went real well. It's just, if there was an offensive player stud that underperformed, I owned them, and I had them all in the same damn roster, and it cost me in my flagship league. I'm playing for third or fourth this week. Cost me a little money there, but I ended up even. You'd won one of them there, Craig. Congratulations, sir.
Thank you.
Won one of those leagues, and then the other one that I was in, I had three of those money leagues like that. I just pulled in fourth. I had some of the same offensive guys in that situation, and watching Ernest Jones and Robinson, Jaguars running back, go down within 2 minutes of each other. I swear, folks, I'm watching one on laptop, one on TV. Jones goes down. I'm like, and I turn around, look, and I'm like, man, that's messed up. And then Robinson grabs his leg and falls. Doesn't even take a step there. So I just there it went. My high scoring teams. Yeah. That flagship team, I was 12-1-1 in a 16 team league, and just busted. It's all over the place. But anyways, enough about my dirty woes.
Brad,
so Craig, you were on a roll, right? You won that one. What else?
I won two this weekend. The one that you had, the redraft. I did well. Justin Jackson. He didn't win it for me, but he made it nice and comfy. I had a team that just shot up all over the place late. Shaq Barrett, Jordan Brooks had really nice games. Xavier Woods had a nice one. Aaron Donald, of course. And then Justin Jackson, waiver wire guy I pick up and plug in with Eckler out, paid off big dividends. So, and the other one that I've talked to you about before, that deep league that I'm in, that with all those crazy defensive scoring, Brad is in that one actually too. He came on later and took over an orphan team that he's trying to build up from the ground.
It was a headless orphan.
Right.
Yeah. It's one of those where I think he got the first year free or something like that because it was bad enough.
Do you guys have any shares of Brandon Jones, the DB for Miami? Did you? Man, I'll tell you what. I went into Monday night and I was down in that flagship league. I was down. I think it was like 160 to 208, and only play left was Brandon Jones on my roster. And I about crap. No, I think he had one small play, and when it,
at least a sack that I know of.
And then the next morning, I kind of dismissed it. There's no way I'm going to make up that kind of ground, man, with one play. That was like 50, 60 points or something. And wake up, and I had 211. He had 223. So for being about down to 160 or whatever, that scoring format of ours, it got it up there. I was like surprised. He had a good game.
Yeah,
it wasn't bad.
Tackles. sack, tackle for loss, PD, QB hit.
Yeah.
Brad, you were saying?
Yeah. Brandon Jones is one of those guys that is kind of a sneaky under the radar guy. If you got him on your roster, there's been some good games from him that you can really trust. And and then you get a guy like Hassan Reddick, who I always play him when he does absolutely nothing. I have Cameron Hayward this week, and in a situation similar to you, where I was facing the 1 seed and I was the 4 seed, and I kept going between him and Hayward. I was like, well, Hayward hasn't always had the best games against this because of Patrick Holmes' capability. And I was like, yeah, maybe I'll go with Hassan Reddick. But man, it's Tom Brady. That's a terrible matchup too. Yeah. So I left him. And luckily enough, I still won, and it didn't hurt me. But it's one of those where you're like, what can you do?
Right.
But yeah, it's definitely been a fun playoff. I didn't hear you mention. Are you still in the fishbowl?
Me?
Craig? I know Craig was doing well. Did you lose this week?
No, I got into the conference finals. I got, I think, 8th in my conference.
I made it to the dance, but after that, I stopped dancing.
Yep.
I didn't have enough firepower to get there. The Chargers were my main. I stacked them when I did the draft, which paid off most of the year, but it just wasn't enough here at the end. So
yeah, COVID's getting them.
Yeah, and speaking of that, so James, of course, our other host here, he is off on special assignment, and he should be back next week to wrap up. Next week will be our last show, sort of the regular season here. We're going to take a little bit of time off, but come back in the off season. So one more Tuesday, 2 more Thursdays for us. So we have no sort of note from James. We'll make sure to catch up with him on that next week. But to your point about COVID, now the COVID rules are changing in the NFL here, it sounds like, where they have that 5-day window to check their symptoms and retest, and if they're fine, then they can possibly come off the list. But we have had a slew, and this is just a small list of sort of the IDP relevant people put on there in the last day, and it could have been more since I last checked. But Casey Hayward, Corey Littleton, Denzel Perryman, KJ Wright, and yes, that is just the Raiders so far. Then you got Brian Burns, Shaq Thompson, Matt Juden, Marcus Golden, Juwan Bentley, Nasir Adderley. All guys that potentially could have been on your team, depending if you're, starting quarterbacks and things like that. And some big names there that could matter for your championship team. Not to mention the injuries, like Gary said, Ernest Jones, he went on the short-term IR, so he may be back for the Rams for the playoffs, but not the rest of the year for your fantasy teams. Shaq Barrett is also out, they said, for the rest of the regular season. Certainly a guy I had on one of my teams this weekend. Tehran Matthews, day-to-day with a quad contusion, although he calls himself the Honey Badger, and now he's calling himself Wolverine. So I don't know if he got his mammals confused is what he wants to call himself here. But sounds like he'll be all right. And then Drew Tranquil left with a leg injury too. So some guys that you may have had there that combined with COVID, that's a real mess for your last week here.
Well, and I was going to tell you, I did see that Will Compton, another Raider linebacker, got put on COVID this afternoon as well. Not that he would be starting in anybody's lineups, but if you were digging for a linebacker, don't dig for him.
No, I think I heard of. Didn't they just shut down Carolina Panthers? Did they
put them on that intense COVID where they're all virtual meetings? You mean?
Yeah, I don't think any of them. I could have swore I heard the whole team was out.
Oh, it could be. I didn't check that far. This was probably around noon today.
Don't quote me. Could have swore I read something about that.
Well, and the rules keep changing. If you're vaccinated, it's 5 days. If you're unvaccinated, it's at least 10 days you're out. I mean, it's kind of all over the place with what they're doing. But it's nice that they're trying to pivot on the fly. I mean, it's good that they're trying to, work with the guys.
Yeah, it's not really going to matter for us for fantasy football. It's so screwed up right now. It's just hang on and hope for the best.
It really seems like they're trying to do some of this now at the end of the year, maybe because they realize it's going to be a big problem and they don't want to have to alter playoff games for these teams with these really big names and have that change the course of a playoff game or who knows, the Super Bowl down the road. I still think it's going to have an effect, but
they did it the right way though. They went ahead and they waited until it was officially made. CDC changes, so then it was easier for them. So they probably knew they were coming. I mean, they've been talking about that change coming for a week or so now. So they probably just held their ground. But I don't know.
You can tell it benefits the owners and the players because when something gets through both sides that fast, there's money involved.
Right. Exactly.
All righty. Well, moving on to sort of, some of the news that we had here, we'll go into these questions about players that looking at for your championship week, hopefully, or potentially third place week, whatever you have here at the end of the year here. And please, if you're watching on YouTube, let us know if you have any sort of questions. If you're not watching on YouTube, please head over there, hit that like button, subscribe, hit the notification bell, and any questions you have for us. Sit start, waiver wire targets, even if you're looking down the road for next year, potentially. We will be going over a lot of that next week on both shows. But if you got something just itching to get in there, let us know this week too, or trade questions even, if you're looking to move someone. And we're going to go to you, Gary, because I know this is one of your guys we talk about. I swear it's been every week, but that's all right.
It seems like it, doesn't it? At least half of it.
It's interesting, So Ernest Jones, like you said, who'd been starting pretty much since that whole Kenny Young trade happened, and Micah Parsons had been claimed, and not Micah Parsons, excuse me, Micah Kaiser. There's not even close to the same player there.
Right.
But anyway, Ernest Jones is out now, and that brings Troy Reeder back into the equation. He had an 86% snap share this past week. He had 6 solos, a pass deflection, and a tackle for a loss. I know we've talked about him a lot here on the show, but given that defense and who they're facing with the Ravens this next week, is he a guy you'd feel comfortable plugging into a starting linebacker lot as championship?
Oh, yeah, definitely. I think there's enough history there. Troy Reeder's the next man up. He was last time Ernest Jones went down that roller coaster ride. It's been Ernest Jones this year, folks. Hey, you'll be able to get him cheap in redrafts next year. You'll be able to grab him late. Don't forget about him. But we'll talk about him again next week. It's going to be a never-ending thing. Ernest Jones. I'm going to join the email fan club and everything. So, but either way, we're as it is. I mean, I trust Reeder, and I love this matchup. It's a top 5 matchup for inside linebackers, and Reeder's going to come out there, and he's probably going to get anywhere from that 80 to 85, maybe up to 90% of the snaps. He's going to wear the green dot. I know Trayvon Howard is going to get some playing time that Reeder had been getting. It's going to be around probably about that 40 or 50% snap count. You might get a little more. I don't know. He did produce with just 40%, well, about 38% this past week. So that is promising. But heading into this week, I mean, if you're targeting somebody, you got to go for Reeder off the top. I mean, I haven't quite got to all my start sit charts yet, so I'm not sure. But I'm saying if I've got another LB1 stud that doesn't have that good of a matchup, and I really need that ceiling, I think I can trust Reeder and put him in there over somebody. Say Kendricks is playing Houston or something, which is they're not very they don't feed the inside linebackers a lot of production during a game. So, I'd slide Reeder in there. I think that he'll have a nice game.
Ed, how do you feel about him?
Yeah, well, I mean, look at what's there in that linebacking group. I mean, college free agent, practice squad guy, 7th round pick. I mean, Reeder's been the only one that's shown that he can be trusted. Like you said, Gary, with the green dot. I mean, that's a big role to fill, and he's been able to do it when given the opportunity. I mean, he doesn't grade out well when you look at PFF. I mean, it isn't the most appealing, but he hasn't had enough opportunity either. With given a full, I would say at least 85% or more snap share, he's going to look good. And he's going against a Baltimore team that's hurting, that's fighting to try to get into the playoffs, but they're not living their best life. Maybe Lamar's back, but Lamar's hurt if he's back. He's playing injured. I think if you're in need and your linebacking group is one of those that maybe you didn't focus on and you don't have a stud, or maybe you have guys that are hurt, I mean, why not? I mean, this is a perfect opportunity for him to just light it up, because that defensive line is going to give him plenty of opportunities to make plays, get the ball. And his best grade, and if you look at something like a PFF, this is pass rushing ability. So I would fire him up if you need kind of a big play, higher ceiling type play, because he could be that this week.
And his name may come up later in the show, so potentially something to shadow there. Brad, we're going to go to you on this one. So the 49ers, you talk about constantly injured. The Ravens, the 49ers this year with injuries, it has just been a mess from really their linebacker core and their secondary. But looking at their linebackers here, Aziz Al Shair, who's been really a nice find this year. I know, Gary, you had him on a couple of teams you had talked about. He's out for the rest of the regular season here anyway. And besides Fred Warner, they really haven't had a whole lot with, Dre Greenlaw not playing for other linebackers. They have sort of another pass rushing one. Samson Ebukam has had some playing time, but he's not really sort of 3-down linebacker. So having sort of those DB safeties playing that linebacker role, Marcel Harris is one that they had do it for a while this year. They had Hufanga sort of do it too, but he's been banged up. Brad, is there anyone on that depth chart for a linebacker besides Fred Warner that you have any interest this week for the 49ers?
No, probably not, just because there are going to be other options that you feel more comfortable about. I've heard him talk a little bit around, when I was digging into San Francisco's media, they were talking about Flanagan Falls might get some opportunity in that room, and because of the injuries, I'm not touching any of that. If you don't have Warner or one of these safeties that maybe is going to get pushed into the box more to do some of that, I would just look elsewhere, because it's just not championship week or close to championship week, depending on your league. You can't trust somebody that either is not comfortable in that defense or not been playing with those guys. I mean, it's Warner, Greenlaw if you need to, and that's probably about it for me. Gary, what do you think about the San Francisco defense?
Yeah, I mean, realistically, Marcel Harris, he's the safety I think you guys are probably referring to, getting the most snaps when either Al's been out or with no Greenlaw. I think it was just a week ago or so that Harris pulled off 100% of the snaps. Well,
it's week 15. Yep.
Right. Yeah. I'm not sure he did anything with those, because he's had a couple of the games. I think one time he kind of produced, and then he did it again. And then 100% of the snaps, or a large amount of the snaps, I didn't think that he got anything. The interesting thing about that is, if you look in Sleeper and at least MFL, those two leagues, he's marked as a DB. Uh-huh. If you go to the home site and if you look at fantasy data, he's actually a linebacker. So technically, he's not a linebacker. We all know that, because he was just a DB last year playing safety all the time. So they got themselves a little nickel safety hybrid guy or whatever. But you can't go there. And this matchup is not that strong this week for the inside linebacker either. Over the last 5 weeks, they're just not allowing that much. So there's only going to be so much to feed on and it's going to be Warner's, So yep. You might as well just roll with Warner and move on.
Sounds good. We're going to go to sort of more of an edge rusher position here for this next one, Gary. Banged up late in the season, very different from what Tampa Bay had last year when they were just one of the healthiest teams on their way to that Super Bowl run. Shaq Barrett, like we said, is going to be out the rest of the regular season, and JPP is still banged up, which leaves a slew of unknowns and sort of old retreads for the NFL, like, William Golston or someone like that at the edge. And Tampa Bay this week, they are playing the Jets, which we know the Jets do give up some fantasy points to their offense here. So if you're looking for probably specifically an edge position, because most leagues you aren't going to want to start these guys at linebacker, these backups, but does someone like Joe Tryon, Sharinka, I think his name is, he have any interest for you if you're looking for an edge that he's going to be getting playing time within this group, and the fact that they're going against the Jets here?
What's hilarious about this whole and me getting this question and everything is, I remember it was like maybe week 2, 3, something like that, with JJ. So JJ, if you're listening, I remember this. One of his questions that we rolled into was, I think JPP was hurt, and his question was, "Hey, are we going to look at this guy? Yeah, Joe, whatever." And we laughed, we giggled. No. It's kind of, and here we are at the end of the season talking about this guy, and he could be a serious play in some deeper leagues. Just like last week when we was talking about Smoot from the Jaguars. Yep. It didn't make any big promises, but we did say the matchup is here against the Jets this week. Go ahead, plug him in those deeper formats. We was COVID. If you needed him, he should be fine. And granted, he didn't light the world on fire, but he didn't cost me anything in my leagues. My offense did. We already talked about that. But either way, I didn't take a 0. I think he had 4 tackles and a tackle for a loss, maybe. Yep. I couldn't I can't remember for sure. So that's that's respectable numbers. It would have been nice to have a sack in there on top of that, but and I see no reason for what this rookie has done so far. I mean, he's been okay when he's got the chance to play in the MSR or the matchup strengths right, and I would have no problem putting him in there. Everybody eats against the Jets. They get a little bit at least.
Well, and when you look at him, Tampa Bay has been focusing on having him as a pass rusher when he's in. I think he's got like 275 snaps as a pass rusher, where he's only like 100, 150 snaps as a run defender. So this is the perfect opportunity for him to have some of those sacks, maybe 1 or 2 sacks in a game, or, a sack and a half, tackle for loss, stuff like that. That really gives him a big week for you. So why not take a shot on that? If this is the big game and you've lost a Shaq Barrett or some of these other players, it doesn't hurt.
Nope.
What do you think, Craig?
Yeah, I mean, the Jets took him in the first round. It was a little bit of a surprise for some people that he went that high. A lot of places had him as a second or third round prospect. But, he showed he knows how to get to the quarterback in Washington when he was up there. He just didn't even play a whole lot at Washington. So I think this is a good opportunity for them to see what they're going to have against him. We know this is the NFL. Anything can happen. Gary Brad is a Lions fan. So, he's seen firsthand this year against the Cardinals. Anything can happen in a given week, even when you might not want it to happen. So the Jets could beat Tampa Bay, but I don't think any of us are expecting that to happen. And it's a good shot for a team that Tampa Bay probably is expecting to win, to go out there and try to get a young guy some playing time to, get him those reps for when they really do need him potentially in the playoffs. So, yeah, I mean, I wouldn't play him just as a straight linebacker unless you're in a big play type of league. If it's any sort of balanced or tackle format, I really don't want anything to do with them. But if it's a big play league and you need a linebacker or definitely an edge type of position and you're hurting, depending on how deep you are, it's definitely worth a shot.
Yeah, he's probably even marked a DL on sleeper leagues. So,
sleeper gets a deep one. Dual designations when they can.
Yeah, we're shooting at this guy just like Smoot last week. He at best DL3. Edge rusher 3, edge rusher 2. If you're really, really hurting, you better be hurting. I know we got a lot of people on COVID, folks, but the leagues that we're talking about, we're talking 4 linebacker, 4 edge rushers, and DL mixture. Deep leagues, folks, deep leagues.
Another defensive line situation we're sitting on here, Brad. So, again, this could change with these new COVID rules, but one of the big names that went down, it was Brian Burns, and he is sort of the linchpin, and then you got Hassan Reddick, who you mentioned earlier, is the other main pass rusher there. But if we're assuming that Burns is out going against the Saints here, do either like Morgan Fox, Uter Gross-Matos have any sort of interest for you? I know Uter's had a couple nice games here in a row, but are you looking elsewhere, or would you be comfortable starting either one of those?
Well, in your deeper leagues, I don't know that there's a lot of options for you to go searching after. So I think you kind of have to pick one of these two, because the matchup against New Orleans is not bad. It's not great, but it's not bad because the quarterback play has been sloppy and the offensive line's been banged up. So one of these guys will have an opportunity to potentially give you something. I would probably lean Gross-Matos just because I like the player coming out better than Morgan Fox or even Darryl Johnson. But that I don't feel strongly about either, though. Gross-Matos has shown at least he could do something. So if you had to pick one and you're, feet to the fire, he'd be the one that I'd pick this week, just because I think he probably has the best opportunity to be successful because we've seen something. Gary, what do you think about that Carolina line?
I know he's had a couple decent weeks. I think my problem is more of trust, even in the whole situation. So I mean, give me the Bucks. Give me the Bucks edge rusher before either one of these two. Mm-hmm. Well, not only because of the matchup, but at least I've seen glimpses of him. I haven't seen that much of these guys to trust it in the playoffs, even in deeper formats. I mean, I would the building, the barn, and the outhouse all had to burn down for me to get there. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Right. So I think that brings up a good thing, and we always talk about sort of as you get towards the playoffs, know your matchup, know the team that you're facing. Like, does it look like you're going to need to go out and find a huge game out of someone, or do you want to take a safe floor? But generally, championship week, are you guys looking, Gary, we'll go to you, just to find a guy that you're going to get something out of if you're having to dig into the waiver wire at this point?
First, I'd have to be in a championship game. I'm kidding. I'm actually in our IDP Writers Sleeper League. I'm going to the championship after I just unplugged my headphones here. But what was the question again? Remind me.
Yeah, so are you looking for sort of a safer floor, where you're going to get something out of these guys? Or are you just, going to shoot for the fences if you're having to play the waiver wire at this point?
Well, and I'll chime in just a thought on it. I think it depends on your roster makeup. So if you are, one of those guys that's had a strong roster all year, everybody's fairly healthy, and you don't have to go to the waiver wire looking for a ceiling play, you can be safer with it. If you know that you've got strong offense that's going to give you, double-digit points per position, and you got strong defense that you've got some guys that you can trust, then you don't have to go digging for ceiling plays. But if you're a 4 seed or a 5 seed that made it to the championship out of pure dumb luck, then you probably have to go look for a ceiling play, and you have to look for a guy who's got just a perfect matchup that should give you something massive. But you got to know your league. You got to know the guy you're competing against. I mean, that all factors into the equation. Gary, how do you handle championship type games with waiver wire?
I try to use what got me there. And if at all possible, but yeah, if you got to swing for the fence, I don't know. In the deeper leagues that I like to play in, I don't play any shallower standard leagues to really compare that to. So, if I do have to dig, definitely the first thing you're looking for is, that higher ceiling player. That's who you're going to find on those deeper waiver wires. But I try to enter everything, trying to use what I got there with, whatever worked. Now this has been a strange year with the COVID, and at the end so that's not actually been like the best. It hasn't worked well this year, and I'm actually questioning this entering next year. How is this really going to work overall in the long run? Is every season with 18 weeks going to be like this now? Is COVID going to be around for all this time? Just look at it. I noticed a lot of playing time that it's like some of these stud players were getting like 6 games in a row where they would get a little extra boost and snap counts, say 70, 75. And then all of a sudden they're back down. They're like the 40, 45. And some of the other guys are stepping in and they're getting more. We had a couple of games this year that it seemed like Demarius Davis has stepped back and told Alexander, go get it. Was he resting up? Were they telling what was the situation behind that? I know the snaps were still there, but I'm just some odd things. And I wonder about that going forward. But to get back to the question, just use what got you there, is probably the safest way to do it.
Well, we actually do have a question here even tonight, IDP, for you. So we have a viewer here who second season into IDP Dynasty, and he's in his championship game, which is great to see at any time. So congratulations.
Good job.
And we do have a question follow-up here. How shallow is shallow for you guys? In his league, there's 2 DL, 2 linebackers, 3 DBs, and a flex. So, Gary, you've been doing this the longest probably here.
I help. I talk to people. I help all the time. It's shallower than that.
Mm-hmm.
When we're talking shallow, I'm talking 6 max, usually 4.
Yeah, about to say 1-1-1 and a flex. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. No, that's knocking on the door of being a nice little deeper league. I'm not a big. I got to be totally honest while we're at it. I'm not a big, huge IDP flex fan. I don't like super flexes. I like using a little bit of flex in the offense. That's fine. But this crazy stuff. But I'm not, when it comes to IDP, I'm not a flex fan at all. I get these questions where, Well, who do I'll tell you one I had this weekend. It involved Lattimore. Who was it? He was looking. I think he actually needed a New Orleans play. So I was thinking it was like Davenport, Lattimore, and maybe C.J. Johnson, whatever that other safety's name, or it was a cornerback. Johnson. It was cornerback, safety, whatever. I don't know. Oh yeah, Marcus Williams. It was Marcus Williams. That's totally. You've got to take into so much consideration of the difference of the players. Now, luckily, what that person was asking me is, who do I take not to take the zero? I just need somebody to perform. I never followed up on this either. I don't know how he did, but I think I told him Lattimore. No, I think Warner was the option. Damn. Either way, that's what I'm talking about. It's hard to look between positions because, cornerbacks might not have as good as a matchup, and it's going to vary each week as what the defensive lineman might have. It's not a clear. I don't like that flex option. I think that I would rather see something along the lines of 3, 3, and 3. There would be beautiful at 9 players, and just make them play for it. The flex is just too wide open.
And to your point, you got to know that you're scoring, and that makes it really hard to answer questions like that when people give them to you. Because if you're in a place that has sort of balanced, where a tackle for a cornerback would be like almost 2 points, whereas for a linebacker it's 1 point. That's a lot more different to try to sort out than here's the scoring for everyone. Mm-hmm. All right, with one game you can sort of figure out, all right, who should we play out of these? But if you're looking across a whole slate, yeah, it is a lot harder. And it sounds like for like most leagues that are sort of standard scoring, it turns into a third linebacker slot, which generally the case for him.
Yeah, but I definitely like your setup, sir. Your setup there is nice. It's not shallow, but it's not real deep. It's just right there. It's a nice format. What do you think, Brad?
Yeah, to get people into IDP, I'm fine with shallow. Give them 1-1-1-1, or something like that, just to get people's feet wet, because people seem to be very apprehensive to the defensive side of it until they start playing and realize that it has some value, and then build on it. And definitely our friend here, that's not necessarily shallow. It's not insanely deep either. I got plenty of leagues where you have to start a D tackle, you got to start corners, you got to, those things really make it even more challenging and even more fun. But I don't mind the 2-2-2. Flexing on the defensive side always tends to be, like our friend here said, it's either a linebacker or a safety. You're not flexing most other positions in, when you get that. So it almost feels like, well, why don't you just make it another position? Just say, hey, you get 3 linebackers or 3 DBs or whatever. So, but I love it. More defense, better. So, Adia, welcome. Glad you're doing well, and from the UK too. Gotta love those friends.
Gary, there's one other league that Brad and I are in. We talk about having to figure out that stuff, that it being a pain in the butt. It's a totally positionless league where you have, I think it's 11 offense and 11 defensive starters. You have to start 1 quarterback. You can start 2, but the rest of the spots you can start tight end, running back, wide receiver for any of them. And defense, it's totally positionless. So you could start 11 cornerbacks or something like that if you wanted to. And trying to figure out, all right, who to pick up and, matchups and with the sort of balanced scoring. That's about as deep as I can get into anything. And it is just a madhouse.
Right. Well, these gentlemen right here, they might have had this league going for 5 or 6 years or something, and they all know what they're doing and stuff. But for somebody that's starting out, if you jump into something like this and you have a flex, I don't care if it's only 1-1-1 or whatever, 2-2-2, really shallow, more 5. If you start sticking a flex in there, and these people are new to IDP, then it kind of becomes a little bit like a stalemate looking position. You've got to learn. I think before a flex should be put in, at least know all your positions and your scoring really well, and everybody should, because all of a sudden it's just, if you don't know your IDP yet, I just think it's just something like you said, you got to figure it out. Of course, you might just be grabbing the best stud off there and putting them in all every time, but that's it. That's the one thing that used to bug me about shallow leagues, is that, when you only start 3 and it's a 12-man team, everybody's got a stud.
Yeah.
So, that's the one thing. I mean, it's great. I'm glad they're doing it, but keep taking that next step and adding another position or something and start making it a little bit more competitive. Oh my gosh, all the good, really good linebackers are gone. I'm going to have to figure something else out, or something. Put a little pressure on it. It's a little bit more interesting, I think.
Oh, and even on top of that, make sure you're tweaking your scoring. I love adding big play type stuff in where where interceptions for X amount of yards return get you a point or just try to make it a challenge. That makes it more enjoyable because you have to do more digging and more reading and understanding. I mean, that makes fantasy fun when you get into the weeds like that. It also makes it a challenge, but
right.
All right. We'll show you a shallow league here coming up real soon. But we got one more thing to go through here. Gary, we mentioned those Raider linebacking core. Holy cow. Is that getting just the worse and worse situation where they were already, bringing the converted safety who they had wanted to bring along slowly, and he's been thrown into the fire. We've talked about Divine Deablo a few times here the past few weeks. But, if these guys Kwiatkowski's out for the year. Littleton had been playing. Perryman had been the guy for him, right? The past 2 weeks. You've seen these guys all on the COVID list. So I don't know how far down the list we even need to go here. But is there anyone out on that list besides Deablo you'd even consider throwing into a line if these guys are out?
I mean, I can mention the name Marquell Lee. He'll, if all those guys are out, it's probably going to be Debo and him, and he's probably going to see about 70-75% of the snaps. Do I want that on my roster? Again, did the outhouse burn down? Am I that desperate? Because I'm hoping. I'll tell you what, I think like Denver's Jonathan Griffith. I think even if Young is even close to coming back next week, I'm not so sure. The reports that were coming out, I don't think they were real happy with Young in that trade. He kind of filled a need at the time, but I think it's Griffith, I think is his name. I think he might have earned himself to at least play for the rest of the year as a starter.
Played really nice past 2 weeks, yeah.
Right. And I mean, it's not just, it's not just production by default necessarily. He's actually getting good reviews. So, I'd like to have somebody like that at least I've seen him play for a couple of times over reaching for Lee over this COVID. If you're desperate, sure. The Colts, what kind of matchup this is over the last.
With Wentz being on COVID and we know he's unvaccinated, he'll be out for at least 10 days. So you're getting Sam Ehlinger at quarterback. I mean, I think you got to try to find a linebacker to play from that team. They might be.
And as they stand, they're top 12 culture for the last 5 weeks have been allowing top 12 numbers to them. So to the inside linebackers. So, I don't know, the more we talk about it, the more I might consider putting him on Craig's team when we get there in a little bit.
I don't think we're going to need to go that deep.
Man.
We'll see. We'll see.
Deablo's graded out pretty well in the little bit of time he's gotten. I mean, you never want to trust a converted corner to linebacker, or safety to linebacker in his first season as a rookie. I mean, that's a lot to throw at a player, but, he's done well against the run, which is kind of why they went after him in the first place. Big physical kid. He's a thumper, had no problem hitting people in college. Pass rush grade, not terrible. I mean, is it the most appealing play? No, but Lee or Deablo, I mean, you might as well take a shot on one if you need the help and you were somebody who had all these linebackers. I mean, I've got Perryman shares, and luckily enough, I have other linebackers that I can play instead, so I don't have to. But one of these two could give you something big against a rookie backup quarterback. They're going to focus on the run, so maybe you just get a bunch of tackles. Who knows?
Yeah. Well, it's just like Jonathan Griffith, played him last week. So, he wasn't. Now it doesn't sound as crazy as it did last week to play him. Yeah. So if you're reaching and you're in, and again, 16-team league, you're playing you got to have 4 starting linebackers. By the time you get to the playoffs, the waiver wire is already bare because even with the trick to those size leagues, folks, is make sure you only got 8 or 9 bench spots. because everybody's going to turn around and keep all their offensive players that they can.
Yeah.
So there's going to be plenty of IDP meat in that third tier level to rotate and play, and everybody can stay active on the waiver wire. That's the trick to these deep leagues. If you've got a 16-team league and you've got 22 starting players for defense and offense, but your rosters are 55, bench spots, that's not fun, folks. You're playing yourself, because you're not working. You're not have to make any decisions. You're not working the waiver wire. So, anyways, that's the trick to those.
All right, and we're getting close down to the time for the show here, and we'll see if you guys have any sort of waiver wire ideas for people here for the last week of the season. We got one more question while I load this up here. What's the correct number of IR spots you'd consider having for IDP? So I think he means if you're having, an offense and an IDP, what are you thinking there?
We usually go two.
Yeah, I've got a few leagues that it's basically either 2 or 5 in all the leagues I'm in. So either or. I mean, we bumped it up in most leagues because of COVID, so that you can kind of bump guys down and up as you need it.
I think it depends on, redraft certainly, with these rules changing. If someone's going to be on a short-term IR, you don't even really necessarily have to have that spot. If he's someone worth keeping, you're going to keep him on your bench anyway. If he's just going to be out for a few weeks, if you're looking at that longer term, like Derrick Henry, people are really hopeful, like, oh, maybe he comes back at the end of the season here. I think by most reports, and I even did in your league that I was in, Gary, I had him, and then, he got hurt, and I ended up cutting him at the end of the year because I needed a spot for someone else. And, it worked out, but you generally think have a good idea.
We're talking redraft, folks.
Come back. Right, for redraft. For Dynasty, honestly, I've seen Dynasty leagues where you have unlimited IR as long as you're not abusing it. And that means like going out and picking everyone up off of.
And then dropping them. Yeah.
And then, So
your flyer list for the following year.
Yeah. And I'm in leagues like that with everyone that's reasonable with it. So, people aren't going out there trying to kill each other because most of us know each other. But even in a year like this, I have a few teams with, 6-7 guys on IR. And if it's Dynasty, if you're competing for a championship, do you really want to have to consider cutting J.K. Dobbins, or someone like that because you're trying to balance that, win the championship, but save your young guys? That's not what Dynasty's for in my mind. But
absolutely.
All right, so we'll talk about some waiver wire target guys here while we go through this. But what I'm going to do, folks, is I'm going to show you this league that I've talked about. It's an 8-team league, so this would definitely qualify as shallow. And we have 2 defensive linemen, 2 linebackers, and 2 defensive linemen. And this league, actually, I'm in the championship this week. So now I have to remember how to share my screen. There we go.
Jeopardy music here.
Yeah, no kidding.
I can't do it right. So there we go.
That one. Got it.
Hired.
So, can you guys see that?
Yahooing it up. Yep.
Okay. So, this is what I have. And again, I've mainly played waiver most of the year here. There are 2 guys on this defensive set, and this is stuff that I've gone through after the game ended last week. So Micah Parsons and Jordan Poyer are the only 2 guys left on my team that I had drafted or had from the prior year. So I've been playing the waiver wire, and I am in the championship game and need to put one of these together here. So you can see who's currently on my team. Most of these guys I had played the prior week or had stashed here. So is there anyone on this list, Gary, that definitely you'd want to be starting going into this week?
All right, so just to make sure, we got Jordan Brooks, Wilkinson, Parsons. Man, Parsons is hard to sit, period. I mean, how do you sit the dude?
Yeah.
I mean,
you don't.
You just, how? You're going to look. I mean, I was so in love with Ernest Jones matchup these past 3 weeks. I was on that bandwagon, sticking my flag where it don't shine. And, I like Reader sitting there. I like Reader sitting there in that matchup with Parsons. You can't sit Parsons. I mean, how can you tell somebody to sit Parsons?
Yeah, I know. It's tough.
Especially a Cowboys fan.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Brad, how do you feel about those two?
Oh, yeah. Of what you got on your roster, I mean, those two are locks in my mind. Reader and Parsons.
Now, Brooks is tough right there. I mean, who's he playing?
He's got Detroit. It's a good matchup for him. I mean, he's definitely got opportunity for points.
Yeah. Oh, man.
But I think Reader gives you a better opportunity because Brooks, they could bring off the field if in a pinch, if they're just going one linebacker and a bunch of DBs,
Yeah, right.
Where Reader's not coming off the field.
Right. And you got Wagner sitting there getting his share. So, right. Yep, makes sense.
All right, so for defensive linemen, I only have a couple because, again, I rotate these guys. Both of these guys have good matchups here with this sort of scoring anyway. Carolina's given up the most defensive end points. And then Wilkins we got against Tennessee, who I'd used this past week and even started. So do you feel good about either one of those, or do you guys want to go see who we got out there on the waiver wire?
Wilkinson I've been using a lot of DTs this year. I've been in those 4 DL leagues or 4 DL that we need.
Yep.
I've actually been playing a lot, rotating a lot of those DTs out of there. I didn't hardly draft any high at all DL this year. I think the highest one I was getting Hubbard, and he was slow. He'd slid down. He was like outside the top 20 for DL when I was getting them. I don't know. I think I just roll with what you got.
Like those two. Wilkins, I played last week. That's why I got him. And Davenport was a free agent that I went and picked up because of the matchup and the fact that when he's had good matchups and he's been healthy, which is a huge key for him. And be interesting to see what New Orleans does.
Let's back up. Wilkins is playing Tennessee.
Yep.
Yeah.
Believe it or not, last 5 weeks, Tennessee is not. I mean, look at this. Look at my numbers.
No problem.
Yeah, I mean, Tennessee's offensive line is.
Yeah, I'm wrong. I was right the first time. I'm playing Wilkinson, and I'll run with Davenport. But that's without even discussing what's on your line. But those are 2 good, solid ones to me, I think. What do you think, Brad?
Yeah, I think Davenport definitely gives you a perfect matchup. I mean, that's kind of a slam dunk. Man, I would probably want Emmanuel Ogbah over Wilkins though this week because the edge, the tackles. I mean, Taylor Lewan's still out, so depending on which side they have him on, he's either facing Radins or Quisenberry, and both of those guys don't grade out very well against pass rushers. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, if you had to pick one or the other, I might lean Ogbah, who's been okay, this year.
Yep.
Obviously, you can see the last few weeks he's been better than okay. But either or, I mean, Wilkins or Ogbah, I think, are good matchups because I think Miami moves Wilkins around a little bit where Ogbah's basically just outside, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. I'm glad I was saying that because we hadn't looked on there without digging too deep. I don't think you have to. Yeah, I don't think you can go wrong with either one of the Miami guys. I mean, Tennessee's top 7 interior defensive lineman production for the last 5 weeks, and they're, I don't know. God damn it! I said that a minute ago too, didn't I?
It's always tough once you start digging in.
Yeah, they're top 10 in both. You're not. I don't know. Pick your guy you think is going to have the bigger ceiling.
I'll make a note here of Ogbah.
You know what you ought to do?
Yeah, Ogbah. You know what you ought to do?
You ought to get him off the damn board.
I can probably do that.
You can make your mind up later. Sorry, folks. It's not dirty pool.
No, don't worry about that. This is okay. We're going to get rid of Curse off my team here.
I might seem wrong, but he's legitimately considering it. I make those moves.
Yeah, and again, you can see this is sort of more shallow, and most of this invested in my offense because I can do that. But anyway, we need 2 defensive backs here now, and so Poyer doesn't have a great matchup. It's not terrible, but he is really the only one on my bench, so we're going to need at least 1 defensive back. So this is where I'll need your guys' help here. You guys can help me figure out, and this is certainly what you'd call a shallow league. Again, you're starting 6 defensive players, 2 at each position, and there's only 8 teams, so it's even more shallow than you'd normally run into. And this is going to just give you guys an idea sort of who's out here. These are just the top scorers and not necessarily, of course, the best for any given week. So we can even
I would look, I would look for anybody playing the Rams I apologize. Ravens, Eagles, 49ers, or Broncos off the top.
So we got Ramsey here. You like him?
Always. I feel like I'm always on the Ramsey train, whether it's good or bad.
That's your top five. Denver's always a nice one, but I mean, Baltimore how do you feel about Lamar and all that, though? You can weigh that in a little bit, see who's playing the Eagles, see who's playing his top five, and try to see what your best-looking guy is. Who's Brandon Jones playing?
He's playing Tennessee, and he's on COVID at the moment.
Yeah. Hey, believe it or not, somehow Tennessee is top 7 there. Man, they're top 7 across the board. Is this thing broke?
No.
I'm just
you're just repeating, Gary.
I'm just messing around.
He's up here, and I know you talked about him earlier in the season, and he did really well. Xavier Woods, how do you feel about him with Green Bay?
Packers are in my top 12.
Because he's had some good plays here.
I mean, if I could...
Well, look at his last game against Green Bay. It wasn't strong.
Yeah. That's another great step there, Brad. And people, when you're looking at this, is to go, also, it's late in the year. You should be looking at these guys on waivers wires and see, okay, well, this was a divisional game this week. They've probably already played them. See what they did the last time. Now, trends do change. Trends do change. Offensive guys get hurt, blah, blah, blah. All this stuff comes into play, but it doesn't hurt to always look back and help. It can help you make up your mind, positive or negative. Let's see.
Yeah, I mean, I like Ramsey. Of the guys that we've been looking at, if you need to grab somebody, Ramsey feels like a solid play. I mean, he's been doing well, getting tackles this season. I think he's got like 56, 57 solos. Yep. He's got some assists. I mean, they're using him all over the formation.
Troy Reader is not actually the fastest guy on the field either, so there's a little bit of extra. might be an extra, and he's not the best tackler in the world. So, there might be a little bit of extra meat on the bone there. Who knows?
All right, we'll go with Ramsey for one of the guys here. And
as I say all the time, on paper, it makes sense.
Yeah. Fantasy on paper is a lot different than fantasy in real life, unfortunately.
No doubt.
How many times do we get button hooked when we do something that makes sense?
Yes. Yeah. When all
logic. I can go pick up another one. So how do you feel? We can sort of see what he's been doing this year. He hasn't been doing a whole lot last year. He's been pretty steady for the season.
Who do they got?
They're playing Atlanta, so it's
Which Atlanta actually started out the beginning of the season just allowing all kinds of shit to the safety or the secondary, but now
not so much lately.
No, they're you might be able to find a little bit of something. I mean, I love Poyer. Poyer's a hell of a player, but I mean for IDP this year, if you might be worth see what you got there. Here we go, folks. We said stick with what got you there, but now we're trying to swing for the fence.
Well, this
is a shallow league, though, folks.
That's right. It's a little bit different here, but gives you an idea what goes into our mindset here when we're digging.
And when it's all over, Craig's just going to go drop all those guys, put everybody back, and be like, "Those Brad and Gary don't know what they're talking about."
These old guys are nuts.
No, I mean, whatever. What about unless something comes up, I'll put him in there. Edmonds against
Cleveland. I mean, that's Cleveland's been.
Yeah, but it's Edmonds, man.
It is.
Yeah, first game against him, he didn't do well. He's only had 2 pretty big games this year.
I can't trust. I can't trust the guy.
No.
What's Adrian Phillips got going on there?
Against Jacksonville?
Nah, I like a little higher.
Although you said against Baltimore, I could stack 2 guys going against Baltimore.
That's not crazy, especially when Baltimore's clearly, I mean, it's not crazy. I've done it, but there's probably no need in this league.
Yeah.
Now, I've done that in a deep league.
Well, you got Marshawn Lattimore you can throw in there against Carolina. I mean, I don't know when a shallow league playing corner makes sense, but
hey, if it gets me the points, that's all I care about.
Right. Well, then what did he?
He's played nicely here.
Has he played Carolina?
He didn't play Carolina.
Oh, he was out that game.
Yeah, it looks like he was out.
I don't hate it just because of how bad the quarterback play's been.
They always make me nervous. Cornerbacks always make me nervous.
they do.
Curl. Who's Curl got?
Nope. Hold on. Curl. Philadelphia.
That's number 2 on the list. By the numbers, by my numbers, last 5 weeks, Baltimore and Philadelphia are like in their own tier, and 1 and 2.
One other guy that I used to have on this team, and I know I cut, he's lower on here because of injuries and stuff, but Chuck Clark, I know he was one of your tips a while ago, a couple of years ago. That
I had no shares of him this year whatsoever. Yeah, no. But it wasn't because I was avoiding him. He wasn't like on my avoiding list. It's just he got drafted around me. You know what I mean? So
Javon Holland.
Oh, what's he doing out there?
I'm about to say I love Javon Holland.
Oh yeah, he's a playmaker. How did Brandon Jones outplay him this year or last week? What happened?
I blame it rookie jitters.
They were both pretty close this past week because he had the half sack with 4 solos and assists. So I thought this week they were pretty close.
But we're still looking at Houston. No, who are we looking at them playing?
He's facing Tennessee.
Tennessee.
Yeah, Tennessee.
Well, yeah, that's top 10. You got a couple of good options there. You can go with, I don't know. Holland probably has your best ceiling.
We'll go get Holland.
Yeah, that was a good catch there, Brad.
Yeah, he's starting on one of my championship teams this week. I love
I'm going to have to get rid of someone. Oh, well, Justin Jackson because Eckler's back.
All right, real quick now, name me one other rookie safety that stood out this year.
I think Richie Grant has stood out at points, but not as an overarching full season. I think Richie Grant is a guy that is intriguing.
Right. Now, if we had this conversation right before and during the offseason, we'd all be sitting here still talking about Cisco and all those guys. Yeah. Remember that? How rookie hype kills, folks. Rookie hype kills.
Well, even a guy like Trayvon Mulrig, like after the first few games, he's been getting like 100% of the snaps. He's just not in a position that's going to get you fantasy points. So you're right, Gary. And, Cisco is one of those guys that I loved because in college, he was just a playmaker. He was always around the ball making plays. And it remains to be seen if he can do that in the NFL because, to your point, he just didn't get a lot of playing time even on a young, bad team. So, it remains to be seen. But if he's a guy you're interested in, maybe he is someone you target later in your drafts if you start hearing stuff next year when he's going to have a better opportunity. We'll see what the new coaching regime thinks of him. But, someone that you can consider. Yeah. And I got to bring it up here, Gary. I don't know if you saw there, Brad's a Michigan fan. And his hat. Gary's Ohio State fan.
Man, I was kind of staring straight through that, man.
He's like, I don't see Mazer.
I don't see those around there. I thought it might have been a McDonald's hat, I guess. I don't know. My bad, man. I don't mean all that.
They have played like McDonald's over the last 20 years.
Right. No, I mean, where'd you get? You guys in that top four? No, you're not in that top 4.
We are. We get to run into the buzzsaw that is Georgia this weekend.
See, I haven't been paying attention whatsoever. As soon as y'all kicked our asses, I just closed it down, man. I got other shit to do, but God damn it. Yeah. I'm a Big Ten fan, actually, especially when Iowa's playing Michigan. I go Iowa. When Minnesota's going against Michigan, I go Michigan. So I'm in the broad aspect of everything, I'm a Big Ten fan.
Anyone but the SEC, right?
Yeah, right, right. Oh, yeah. Yes, please.
I love.
Well, thank you everyone for tuning in here tonight as we're winding down here, and we got our Adil. I think. Sorry if I'm mispronouncing your name, but you're tuning in, letting us know, what you got for your team in that league. And it sounds like you certainly got some nice players. You drafted good name defensive players. So hopefully it serves you well in your championship this week. Make sure you pay attention. Levante David had been out. Demario Davis, I think, was out on COVID. So make sure you're paying attention to that, how things are going. And if you have any questions.
He's got one, man. He's got a good one.
There we go. But if you have any questions, even after this, they check the YouTube, but you can find our Twitter handles here. Any of us will be happy to answer your questions or tag all of us and get all our thoughts. But what do you got for us? So he's got Donald, Hubbard, Reddick, and he's picking up DeMarcus Lawrence. Needs to pick two of those guys. Who would you pick? I think Aaron Donald's probably a gimme, but go ahead, Brad.
No, well, yeah. I mean, you start your studs. I mean, Donald's got to be in there. This week, probably Hubbard. See, this would be the week Reddick would have just a monster game because I don't play him. But I would lean Donald and Hubbard just because I think those are the most consistent studs of your. I mean, Reddick should be a stud, but he's just so inconsistent.
Yeah, you can't trust him at the moment. So I'm either going Donald. Yeah, who's Cincinnati playing again? I know. Here I go.
They got the Chiefs. They got Kansas City.
That could be a little sticky. And then Dallas.
Since his defense has been solid this year, a pleasant surprise.
Yeah. Trey Hickers. Whatever.
Hendrickson.
Henderson. Yeah. He. I totally had him. I had to apologize like halfway through the season. Everybody, I had him mispegged. I figured he'd go up there, got paid, just flop. I didn't expect him to do anywhere near what he did this year. So, I had that one wrong. And luckily, I still got him on a couple. I was throwing them on like at the end. I'm still wondering. So Dallas is playing who?
They got Arizona.
Yeah, they got Arizona.
Like I said, folks, I start my start sits tomorrow morning. But I got to be honest. Just based off the matchup, I'm probably switching it up, and I'm going to go ahead and drop Riddick for DeMarcus Lawrence and playing DeMarcus Lawrence and Donald. Last 5 weeks, to me, the Cardinals have been giving up the top 10 off the edge. And on the other end of the spectrum, it was who?
He had Hubbard going against KC, and his other one was Reddick. And I don't.
Oh, wait a minute. No, I want to apologize. God damn. Oh,
Carolina's playing the Saints.
All right. Actually, I'm going with Brad. Never mind. I'm going with Brad because I was completely wrong. Kansas City is the top one, too. So consistency wise, I apologize for that, folks. That's why I always got to stop and look. It gets annoying, doesn't it, Craig?
No, it's all right. It's better to check. Me personally,
I can't bullshit. I have been around too many people that will give you a answer off their hip. You just tell they're shooting from the hip on everything. You just hoping to hit something. I can't. If I don't know it, I just pass it on. But that's why I look everything up. I can't stand it. I'm boring you guys tonight.
No, I don't think you're wrong with either one. Whether you do Hubbard or Lawrence, I think they both have a good chance of giving you some really solid production. Now, obviously, over the last 3 weeks, DeMarcus Lawrence has been lights out compared to Hubbard. Hubbard's been struggling, but it's not Hubbard struggling. It's Cincinnati's defense has been really strong, so he just hasn't been able to show out as much.
This almost falls right underneath that. Use what got you there, and considering that you have on there, you're going to be picking up Lawrence. You can also just use what you got and go with Hubbard and Donald, unless you're going to do what I was talking about earlier with Wilkinson and get Lawrence off that board because he's got a good matchup. Drop Riddick. Good luck.
Yeah,
Brad. Let everybody know where they can find us. Thanks for jumping on here tonight with us.
Yeah. Always a pleasure. I loved it. Love talking to you guys. It's a blast. You can find me rotoheat.com. You can find me Rotoheat Brad on Twitter. That's about where I'm most active. Get a lot of DMs, questions about fantasy, IDP, all that, and over there. Over on Rotoheat, we're getting our rookie content spun up, and we're working hard. I've got through my top 15 or 20 IDP rookies so far that I've been watching film on. So. That's where we get going with it. We're getting ready for rookie season, and it's a fun time. So I appreciate you guys having me and love it. Whenever you guys need some help, I would love to jump on and talk ball with you, Gary. It's always a pleasure to listen to you and talk to you because you do a great job, my friend.
Thank you. And hey, love to have you back on there anytime you can make it. We can get you in there, man. Hey, you're always welcome, Craig. He's got he's got the door or the key to the door. So you guys, this work out real well. Hey, folks, I just want to remind you, if you would, please subscribe and all that. But also, leave a comment where I'm trying to do better of watching our YouTube and answering questions and such on there. And if, you really need to, you can reach out and catch me at the IDP Tipster on Twitter. I'm always willing to help all I can. And we're wrapping up this season really quick here. So we got some specials going on. I just want to let y'all know we're going to take a little time off in January, and then we're going to come back with your all-season content. Craig and Brad, you guys have your pod starting back up, right?
It is. We don't have a set date, I don't think, but sometime coming up here in January or February, we'll get our off-season Monday show going back.
Yeah. Once we get through plenty of rookies, we'll start figuring out when we want to get back on Mondays.
Right. I was going to say cold feet, but the cold feet is if you start too early, then about the time you hit July, you're like, why'd we start then?
Once you get to that point in the season, you're hoping you can get some guests on, so you can just have some good back and forth and things like that to keep the conversation moving. It's always funny.
Yeah, I'm thinking about just if we hit it hard here on getting defensive from February for a couple of months there, we just take July off, come back in August.
We'll figure it out.
I'll watch you guys on Monday night.
Hey, feel free to jump in and tell us how we're wrong. We're fine with it. We don't get defensive nearly enough. Brad is too agreeable to yell at me on here.
Well, that's no fun.
We try to be on the opposite side of things, but Craig and I see a lot of things very similarly when it comes to looking at defensive players.
Yeah.
Well, that's why it's good to have other voices come on and jump on another show when we can and stuff like that to get other opinions and look through a different lens to see what we're missing, because clearly we all got stuff to learn every year. And COVID has taught us
as much. Yeah.
If you didn't start digging into deep plays this year, boy, I don't know if you're ever going to get into it. So
yeah, this has been terrible.
But make sure you go over Gridiron Ratings. Gary said, he's going to be updating his weekly sit-start type of stuff to get you through the championship here with those matchups. So go check that out. Make sure you're subscribed on YouTube. Again, like button, notifications, and thanks for chiming in their comments all night and for throwing us that follow on Twitter. Let us know if you need anything. But again, we'll be back on Thursday night. Host JJ Wenner, Dynasty Trip, and Gary getting you ready for the weekend.
Nice.
With Weekend Primer. And then next week, both shows, Tuesday and Thursday, we'll be sort of going over early 2022 targets for guys we're looking at. Again, not guys that we're telling you to go out now and pick up in Dynasty if you aren't, because they're going to save your season next year. But guys, we're keeping an eye on heading into there. So again, thank you, everyone. I hope you have a great night, and we will see you on Thursday.